Hi there, this is Janet Gershen-Siegel, and this is ICM 522, the ethics class, module 11, and it's on net neutrality. And I'm here to talk about an ethical approach. Now, what is it? That's the first question. Now, Stuart Leung of Forbes, he says, quote, net neutrality is the principle that suggests maintaining what we have now, an internet that, according to the FCC's own open internet page, quote, uses free, publicly available standards that anyone can access and build to, and that treats all traffic that flows across the network in roughly the same way, end quote. So essentially, he's saying that that the people who are in favor of net neutrality are attempting to keep the internet as free and democratic as possible, but those who are against it, which would be large companies such as Comcast and Time Warner, they are trying to offer enhanced services to people who want to pay for them and who are obviously capable of paying for them. And the FCC was proposing a kind of two-tiered system, and that was what sparked the current debate. The two-tiered system being that people with wealth would have one level of broadband service and access, whereas people without would be relegated to a lower level. But not so fast. The current state of high-speed internet access really is nowhere near as equal as Leung's statement would have one believe. Now, according to Computer World, and they were quoting a survey by the New York Times, there's a good 55% of Americans who only have one choice when it comes to broadband providers. Now, let's let that sink in for a second here. Over half of all Americans have just one choice for broadband providers. Unsurprisingly, that same survey also found that 45% of all households with an income of $20,000 or less had broadband access. So less than half of people who are really at the lower level of poverty just don't have broadband access at all. Now recognize that people will get access. They will access the internet in other ways. One thing that the debate and also that survey don't seem to take into consideration is that people who might not have it at home are still going to be accessing the internet from things like libraries and schools and maybe their workplaces. It might not be as fast as they might want. They have to go by whatever their company or their school or their library is able to do and afford and support. But these are people who are 100% off the grid, completely unconnected. Of course, there are people who are unconnected, but that 45% figure might seem higher than it truly is. Continuing, households on the other end of the spectrum, unsurprisingly, if you've got an income of $75,000 or more, those households were connected at a rate of 91%. So more than 9 out of 10 were connected at the broadband rate. The disparity really was felt across racial lines. So a good 1/3 of African American or Hispanic households was not connected via broadband, and that compares to 1/5 of white households and about 1/10 for Asian households. Now, whether that's directly related to income or it's from other reasons, perhaps cultural ones, the survey didn't get into, so I don't have those specifics. So it's not necessarily that it's race that's causing people to have less access. It's more likely that it is income that is pushing people to be less likely to have access. So what Leung is talking about, he's mentioning a condition of equality. He seems to have nostalgia for a condition of equality that just doesn't even exist at the present time. All in favor. According to an Ask Your Target Market survey, 76% of those surveyed said that internet service providers should not be able to differentiate between high bandwidth services and other online data. Sounds good, right? So this is a little over 3/4 of all people surveyed said, don't make a difference between when I'm streaming Netflix or I'm doing something else online. But the questioning was weighted rather heavily in favor of net neutrality. It didn't seem to be as unbiased a survey as you might think, or as you might want, because survey respondents were also asked a very negative question, which was whether they thought that internet service providers should be able to, quote, block, slow down, or charge extra for high bandwidth services. And the response should come as no great shock to anybody that a good 90% of all the people who were asked about all these horrible things that ISPs could, potentially or theoretically do, they said, no, I don't want this. I'm not in favor of this. But what would have happened if the question had been framed in a more positive manner? Charging more in one area, such as for, high data usage and streaming, things like that, means that you charge less in another area. This is a zero-sum game. You're charging more in one area, it means the other area you're charging less. So why weren't the survey respondents instead asked about the potential cost savings of being charged less for lower bandwidth activities? I mean, if you never stream, then why wouldn't your internet service cost you less money? So why weren't survey respondents asked about that, whether they would like to save money if they never stream Netflix, for example? A little more opinion in favor, and I'm sorry that this print isn't very large. The Washington Post, I'm going to mangle her name, Katrina vanden Heuvel, also came out in favor, and she stated, quote, the importance of preserving net neutrality should be obvious. A tiered internet will be great for the profits of telecommunications companies, but terrible for entrepreneurs, stifling the kind of innovation that can build massive followings before ever leaving the garage. Not only will big corporations gain an advantage, but also a small handful of them will have the ability to actively interfere with their competition. An internet provider that offers its own phone service could block access to Skype, for example, or a cable company could disrupt Netflix's streaming service. Worse yet, sanctioning the creation of fast lanes could lead to online discrimination, with the providers choking off controversial views to protect their financial or political interests, end quote. Now, I've got to say, I think that this is alarmism. I don't see this happening. And I can cite right now, I have a smartphone, and I get this through AT&T, so I get it through a phone provider. However, I've got access to Skype, no problem. Skype doesn't come in any slower than anything else that I'm getting on my smartphone, whether that's Facebook or anything else. I get my regular internet access through a cable company, through Comcast, actually, big bad Comcast, but they don't seem to be slowing down broadband and Netflix and YouTube or anything else. All these other places where I can get my entertainment from, nobody's blocking those. Now, it's a little more of concern whether there are financial or political interests that are being pushed around. If a company is saying, okay, well, we're in favor of let's say the liberal candidate, and we're going to squelch all conservative opposition and any conservative opinions that you might be getting. Well, yeah, that would be a big problem. Obviously, that would be a civil rights issue, though. That has nothing to do with net neutrality per se. That's a constitutional problem. That's a First Amendment issue. But I don't think that's what's happening here, and I don't. But keep that in mind. I don't see that happening here. Now let's get into the ethical considerations. One of them is the utilitarian argument, which is that an action is right when it maximizes benefits and minimizes negatives, and that seems to be vanden Heuvel's argument. She's saying that small-time entrepreneurs could be crushed, and so could communication companies' competition. Further, there's also the eudaimonism argument, which is of maximizing happiness, and that seems to be what most people are following. I'm interested in faster service because I want to be streaming Netflix, I want to be seeing Orange is the New Black, etc., and I want to see that without it buffering and slowing down and whatnot. Let's go to the other side. All opposed. First off, straight out of the gate, and I'm recording this on April 7th, 2015, and this is the day that he announced. Presidential candidate Rand Paul, he comes out against net neutrality, and he's arguing that the free market should determine access, but recognize that Rand Paul is coming at this from a libertarian viewpoint, and so he's looking to keep government out of a lot of things. So that's kind of where he's coming from. But another person who I found who was against net neutrality was a guy named Joshua Steimel, and I probably just mangled his name, of Forbes. And what Steimel is arguing is that net neutrality adds a layer of government interference, and that the government just does not have a great track record when it comes to protecting its own citizens' freedoms, and in particular their right to privacy. Now, I'm not so sure about this because even though, yes, the government has not been great about a lot of things, altering the speed of downloads and streaming doesn't necessarily translate into online snooping. More of the opposition's opinion. I think Steimel said it really well, so that's why I'm quoting him a lot. Further to his points, he's also citing the lack of competition in the marketplace. For him, the issue is more that the free market doesn't seem to exist in this area. That a lot of it's been propped up by regulation and the government stepping in. So he's saying, government, you should pull out of this because you're already in it way too deep. Steimel also argues that truly free competition for telecoms would probably put behemoths like Comcast out of business in maybe 10 years. For Steimel, if the speeds aren't set, then the prices can rise or fall, and potential newcomers into the market could presumably charge more or less, or they could provide faster or slower service or something else, for that matter, as the market would bear. But right now, if you're going to make everything pretty much the same, then there really is no market. You're creating a monopoly. You are creating a singular market, and that means that anybody trying to get into this has a big disadvantage, because if we're going to be able to charge pretty much the same thing, we're going to be able to put the internet out on broadband in pretty much the same way. And if everybody can do this, then of course new companies, new competition are going to really be hamstrung by this, because they've got all these ramp-up costs, all these startup costs that an established company such as a Comcast just plain won't have. Ethical considerations again. So let's get back once again to Rand Paul's libertarian argument. His approach is essentially deontological, where he's saying that there's a duty to be observed in all circumstances, and that if the government gets out of the business of the internet and other things, because he's a libertarian, so he wants government out of a lot of stuff, then citizens are going to act morally, so that if the government is not there, they're not necessary to get citizens to behave morally, that citizens are going to do this on their own. And Steimel's approach is almost a contrarian one, where he's saying that if the parties make an agreement to certain speeds and prices, whatever those agreements are, then the broadband provider is required to comply just with any other contract. And to do so otherwise is risking a breach. The common ground, I just want to kind of end with a little bit of common ground here, because I've been reading quite a bit of this. And I think the biggest thing that everybody seems to agree on is that there's a real lack of competition to provide broadband service. But the problem is that whether this situation will be rectified by these new net neutrality rules, that part remains to be seen. And the more I've read of this, the more I've thought that net neutrality sounds really good on paper, but the more that I read about it, the more I think, well, maybe this isn't the world's greatest idea. So, but we'll stay tuned and we'll see what happens with the government, with the free market. And I had a bunch of sources. And so this is Janet Gershen-Siegel for Module 11 of ICM 552, which is the ethics class at Quinnipiac University. And I thank you for listening.